right, thanks, Phil. And joining me to talk about these recent allegations is Christine Pelosi. She's the general counsel of the group We Said Enough. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And let's start by telling us what the We Said Enough group is.
Well, 60 days before the legislature's announcement on Thursday, we wrote a letter spearheaded by Adama Iwu, who just graced the cover of Time magazine as a silence breaker. We wrote a letter complaining about the pervasive culture of sexual harassment in California politics and in the legislature. Since then, we formed a nonprofit to help women and men come forward and devise real reforms. Our WeSaidEnough.com website is dedicated to not only resources for victims and advocates, but also trying to forge a path forward so that instead of having Twitter justice, we have lasting justice.
And what do you make of the recent moves that we've heard about? We just said, Kevin De Leon has made a couple of announcements. How's the Capitol handling this in your estimation?
Not well, still bumbling. The fact of the matter is, when we wrote our letter, it took them 60 days to announce that they were going to have a hotline with Weave, which is a great organization, but there is no path to justice for the survivors. We were told that there's an independent law firm, the law firm that's given over $1 million in political contributions, including hundreds of thousands of dollars to Californians. So our concerns are, number one, do you have an independent ombudswoman? Number two, just because the Senate now says they have a different law firm as opposed to the one they hired a few weeks ago, what happens if a senator assaults an assembly member? What happens if a senator assaults a member of the assembly staff? Who investigates? What's the path to justice there? And can they really be expected to police themselves? I was a former prosecutor in the San Francisco DA's office. I know how difficult it was for the Catholic Church to police itself, for the military to police itself. It's just not possible for politicians to do that. So they really need to do more. And
so we have this hotline, for example, and so if someone calls the hotline and sort of discloses something, they still don't have whistleblower protection. Isn't that true?
That is true. So what the legislature needs to do in California, and frankly what we need to do across the country, is make sure that you have not only a hotline, it's connected to services to victims, but also that the victim is guaranteed non-retaliation by the legislator or the member of Congress he or she is accusing.
Now, we just had this committee hearing where in the assembly where they laid out the frankly embarrassing process that is in place, if you want to call it that, for people who want to complain about this or other issues. Are you aware of any draft legislation or any kind of reforms that maybe, because the legislature's not in session, to be fair, they don't come back until the first week in January, so anything that is ready to be put in front of them as a result of this just incredibly eye-opening committee hearing?
Well, we are planning legislation at We Said Enough, and if the legislature won't do it, we'll ask the voters to do it, because we feel that what we're seeing now is a legislature that doesn't know because they don't want to know.
Well, and it's so interesting because for a number of people at the Capitol, they would say the same thing about business. They would say they can't, they can't police themselves, and they need to have the laws require very specific things on the private sector. And then we look at the legislature itself, and it's, it claims that it wants to police itself and has this really strange system in place there. Things happening that they would never allow to happen in the private sector happening at the Capitol.
Well, that's right. Politicians are exempting themselves for the things that they're asking other people to do. Most employers go by the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, the EEO Commission, and so you have basic rules and structures that are in place. What we're trying to do, though, is take a step over this and say, look, get an independent system, make sure that the victims have services. These are the holidays, Melissa, which is at a time where a lot of people are triggered by past memories of sexual assault and harassment. And with a new case coming out apparently every hour, there are a lot of victims out there who realize that they've been kept out of power for far too long, and especially around the holidays. They really need these hotlines like 800-656-HOPE and others to help them get through.
Now, you have apparently become a hotline in many cases for people who have had issues over at the Capitol. What has that been like for you as we wait for an actual independent and protected hotline?
Well, the victims who call us and continue to call me very, very concerned. Will my perpetrators see justice? Will I be forever blacklisted if I put my name out there? What if I go ahead and I make a claim and I name a name, and then I'm the one that's retaliated against and my perpetrator refuses to leave? I mean, I don't know what happened in that house, but even that you have the pro tem living with a committee chairman who invited a young woman over, fired the staffers in the same meeting where they were going to complain about him inviting the young woman over to the home he shared with the pro tem. Now the pro tem tells the chairman, I'm taking away your gavel, you need to resign. The person gives up the gavel, doesn't resign. That's a mess. So the victims are looking at that and saying they can't police themselves. Not even from a political standpoint. What the victims want is a sense not only of wholeness, but also the opportunity to advance ahead in politics without discrimination, bullying, and abuse.
Well, I have to say, thank you so much for being here. And I think that if you put a ballot measure together to, to achieve what these folks won't do for themselves, probably would have no problem getting that one passed at the voting booth. So, Christine Pelosi, thanks so much for being with us this morning.